Hi, I'm Rowan Cade, and this is the story of the last time I let someone call me family without earning it. It started with a phone call, not a dramatic one, not even emotional, just a flat, measured tone from my mother, as if she were confirming a dentist appointment. "Hey honey, I was thinking, do you have a minute?" The question didn't mean she was checking in. It meant she had something she wanted. I was in my office, staring at the quarterly reports for a client portfolio that had outperformed every forecast. I muted the Zoom meeting, running silently in another tab. "What's going on?" I asked, already bracing. "We need a little help," she began. "Your sister's had some professional setbacks." I didn't flinch. Brielle always had setbacks, failed brand partnerships, sudden rebrands, emotional burnouts she healed with retail therapy. Mom cleared her throat. "She just needs a bit of time to recover. We were hoping, if you can, you might loan her $100,000. I said nothing for a beat. Not because I was shocked, but because I was tired. "Loan," I repeated. "Or gift?" Mom sighed, the way she always did when I asked questions she didn't like. "Whatever you're comfortable with. It's just, she needs to maintain her sponsorships. Her image is fragile right now." The silence between us grew long. I could hear my mother's patience thinning, like she was waiting for me to act how I always did. Reliably, quietly, without question. "I'm going to say no," I replied calmly. "Not because I don't care, but because this isn't the first time, and I don't think enabling this is helping anyone." There was a pause. Then she spoke with a tone that dropped the sweetness altogether. "You've always made it hard to love you, Rowan." I don't know why that sentence stung more than anything she'd said in the past decade. I had paid her mortgage for 2 years, helped her cover medical bills, sent Brielle cash when she said her brand was collapsing. And yet here I was, the daughter too difficult to love, because I said no once. "I hope you'll reconsider," she added before hanging up. No goodbye, no warmth. That night, I stared out the window of my apartment in Portland, watching the rain trace rivers down the glass. I wasn't sad, just hollow, like something that had been quietly decaying for years had finally collapsed inside me. The next morning, I received a group text. "Mom, we're hosting a small dinner this Friday, family only. Would love to see you." I stared at the message for a while, then reread it again. No mention of the call, no apology, just a casual invitation, as if nothing had happened. Something about it felt off. It wasn't the kind of dinner invite you sent after accusing your daughter of being unlovable. It felt too timed, too tidy. But I agreed to come, not because I wanted to, because I needed to know if this dinner was what I suspected it was, a performance, one where I'd been cast in the role of the villain. And they just needed me to show up so the story could stick. I arrived at my mother's house Friday evening, cake in hand, her favorite, a white chocolate raspberry layer from the same bakery I'd ordered from every year since I was financially stable enough to. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the seating. Formal, structured, like an intervention or a negotiation. My mother smiled too quickly. "You came." I nodded. "Of course. You said it was a family dinner." My stepfather barely looked up from his wine glass. Brielle stood beside him, dressed head to toe, in something that screamed expensive but stressed. She gave me a tight-lipped smile. There were no smells of food, no warmth, no music. Just a table already set. The tension so thick I could slice it with the cake knife I hadn't yet unwrapped. And that's when I realized, this wasn't dinner. This was a tribunal. Ever walked into a room and realized you weren't invited? You were summoned. I placed the cake on the counter, unacknowledged. My mother didn't even glance at it. Brielle was perched at the edge of the love seat, like she was preparing for a photo shoot. Legs crossed, posture flawless, but her hands twisting a cocktail napkin into ribbons. "Rowan," Mom said, gesturing to the stiff dining chair directly across from her. Not beside her, across. It felt deliberate, strategic. I sat. "We appreciate you coming," she began, hands clasped neatly on the table, like a therapist about to deliver bad news. There's been a lot of tension lately, and I think we all need to be on the same page about what family means. I waited. Alan, my stepfather, cleared his throat. It's about balance, Rowan. You're very independent, and while we admire that, it's also created distance. Brielle suddenly found her voice. It's always been about you doing your own thing, making your own money, living in your own world. That's fine, but it's made it hard to connect. I blinked. I've covered your rent. I've helped with Mom's hospital copays. I sent you money when your brand pivoted, and you said you were going to launch a skincare line. What part of that is living in my own world? Brielle's voice rose a pitch. I didn't ask you to do that. No, I said. But you sure didn't offer to pay me back either. Mom raised her hand like a traffic cop. Enough. This isn't about keeping score. Of course it wasn't. It never was. Until the scoreboard didn't favor them. I think, she continued, it would be good for everyone if we formalized some boundaries. We're not asking for handouts, but family supports each other. Alan chimed in again. And sometimes that means redistribution. That word hung in the air like a foul smell. Redistribution. You're talking about my money, I said slowly. Again. Mom smiled gently, like I was being sensitive. It's not your money, honey. It's family money. We raised you. We made sacrifices. Now it's your turn. Brielle folded her arms, a smug look creeping across her face. And just like that, I saw it clearly. This wasn't a conversation. It was a play. And I was just an unwilling audience member. The scripts had already been rehearsed, the outcome pre-decided. So what is this then? I asked. Another loan? Or are you just going to start invoicing me for being born? No one answered. I reached into my purse, pulled out a plain envelope, and slid it across the table. Here's the full transaction record from the past 5 years. Every payment I've made for this family, totaling just under $76,000, since we're being transparent. Alan barely glanced at it. Brielle rolled her eyes. Mom didn't touch it. That's not the point, she said again. We brought you here because we think it's time you stop isolating yourself. Be a part of the family again. Translation: pay up. Smile while you do it. I stood slowly. You don't want a daughter, you want a sponsor. Brielle scoffed. Oh please, don't make this dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic, I was just done. You asked for a family meeting, here I am. But if you think I'm going to bankroll Brielle's Gucci addiction and call it love, you're wrong. Mom's expression turned steely. If you walk out of here, Rowan, don't expect us to include you in anything moving forward. That was the moment, the final chip on the scale. I looked around the room, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. You already stopped including me, I said. You just forgot to say it out loud. And I walked out. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls, just me and the hum of realization. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the designated ATM, and now the card had been declined. I should have trusted my gut the moment Mom texted me the words, just dinner, just us. It wasn't just dinner, and it certainly wasn't just us. The last time we had one of these family sit-downs, I was 23 and just about to sign my first business contract. That meeting ended with Mom guilt-tripping me into co-signing Brielle's first apartment lease. Brielle dropped the lease 6 months later without notice, and I paid off the penalties in full. No one brought it up again, least of all Brielle. So when I pulled up to the house that evening and saw 5 cars in the driveway, including Aunt Cora's massive Tahoe, I knew I was walking into something else entirely. My pulse didn't quicken. My jaw didn't clench. I had trained myself too well by then. I just sighed, fixed my coat, and carried in the bottle of Merlot I'd been told to bring. Inside, it was theater. Brielle, of course, was perched at the table in a white cashmere wrap, like some weary heiress recovering from emotional labor. Mom wore a soft pink blouse, pearls, and her "I'm about to make you feel bad for saying no" expression. Dad barely glanced up from his plate. Aunt Cora gave me that tight-lipped nod she always used when she had something rehearsed. Rowan, Mom began, gesturing to the seat directly across from Brielle. We're so glad you could make time. Make time. As if I didn't already rearrange 3 back-to-back meetings and cancel dinner with a potential investor just to sit at this table. I sat. Brielle looked up, not with gratitude, but with performance. Her eyes welled ever so slightly. I almost laughed. It was a new record. We hadn't even passed the bread. Then the speech began. Mom started with a story about the hardships of growing older, about how financial anxiety keeps her up at night, about how she's doing the best she can to help her children stay afloat in a tough economy. I nodded when appropriate. It was always the preamble to something manipulative. Then came Aunt Cora. She pivoted quickly into talking about family legacy, how our grandparents believed in shared responsibility, how those who succeed must look after the ones who struggle, how generosity isn't charity, it's duty. Then finally Brielle. She sniffled once, bit her lip, and said she felt abandoned when I rejected Mom's request for the $100,000, that it wasn't about the money, it was about the message, that I was saying her future wasn't worth investing in. You have so much, Rowan, she whispered. Why does it hurt you to help? I held her gaze for a long time. Then, I reached into my purse and pulled out the printed spreadsheet I had prepared that morning. Neatly highlighted, column by column. 2 years of financial transfers to Mom's account, mortgage overages, utility payments. Brielle's credit card debt covered 3 separate times, $137,644.89. No embellishment, just facts. I slid it across the table. I've helped, I said quietly, more than anyone in this room knows. But what hurts me is that none of it seems to count when I finally say no. For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Then Dad finally spoke. You didn't have to keep score. I turned to him slowly. No, but someone had to keep receipts. That was the first time I saw genuine discomfort in my father's eyes. Not rage, not dismissal. Discomfort. The kind that only comes when someone's script no longer works. Mom leaned forward, her voice now brittle. Sweetheart, we're just trying to keep the family together. You've isolated yourself. We thought maybe, tonight, we could remind you what it means to be one of us. I nodded. That's exactly what tonight did. Then I stood, tucked my chair back in, and walked out. No shouting, no dramatics, just a quiet exit. Because there's nothing louder than a silence backed by truth. What they never understood was that family isn't a contract where one party gives and the other decides when it's enough. It's supposed to be mutual. And somewhere between the manipulation and the manufactured guilt, mine had become a subscription service with a cancellation fee. Curious where this dinner table war will lead. Keep watching. It's just getting interesting. The house didn't fall apart after that night. It just stopped pretending it was standing. I didn't call. They didn't check in. Weeks turned into quiet margins of space where guilt used to sit. There were no emergency texts about the water heater, no passive-aggressive forwarded articles from Mom about the power of forgiveness. For the first time in years, there was nothing. And yet, something strange happened in that stillness. I started breathing easier, but silence, when it comes from family, never stays clean for long. It eventually comes back wearing a new mask, usually one made of desperation. 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Alara Dorn. She was an operations lead at a mid-sized tech firm I'd consulted for years ago. Her message was polite, almost too formal. Hi Rowan, a mutual colleague mentioned your recent work. We're quietly assembling a new panel on ethical investment and thought leadership. Would love to discuss your involvement. I almost ignored it, but something about the timing felt off. Not suspicious, just curiously timed. We set up a call. Turns out, the panel wasn't just real. It was being sponsored by a business column at a major syndicate. They were launching a video series on invisible labor among women in financially strained families. and someone had apparently mentioned my name after hearing about what I'd gone through. I hadn't spoken publicly about my family. I hadn't tweeted a single cryptic message or posted anything beyond a quiet New Year's photo. But somehow word had leaked, and I realized it didn't scare me. It felt freeing. "I'm not sure I want to share something so personal," I told Alara. She paused. "You don't have to share pain, just perspective." So I said yes. I didn't give them names. I didn't rehash the numbers. I simply told the truth about what it feels like to be used as a safety net and then accused of selfishness the moment you decide to step back. I spoke about the cost of being the reliable one, how it erodes not just your savings, but your sense of worth. The video aired 3 weeks later. I didn't promote it, but the algorithm did. It wasn't viral, but it rippled, quietly, powerfully. My inbox filled with strangers, messages from women named Lisette, Dana, Morgan, some with 3 kids and a mortgage, some fresh out of divorce, some taking care of parents who still blamed them for everything. "I thought I was the only one who paid their brother's rent in silence," one wrote. "My mom told me I was ungrateful when I finally said no," another said. "You gave words to the exhaustion I didn't know how to explain." For every message, I felt a thread loosen in my chest. The weight I had mistaken for loyalty was unraveling into something else, self-trust. And then, like clockwork, came the next blow. From home. Mom texted one evening, completely unprompted. "Mom, saw your little interview. Very clever. We didn't realize you hated your family that much. No, hi. No, how are you? Just shame. Weaponized." 2 hours later, Brielle messaged too. "Brielle, so now you're some feminist martyr. That story wasn't even true. You've always been dramatic." It took me 3 full minutes to respond. Then I wrote, "I didn't mention your name. If you recognized yourself, maybe ask why." I put my phone down and didn't check it again until morning. By then, 3 relatives had unfriended me. 2 sent vague public posts about narcissists who turn their own blood into content. Aunt Cora posted a meme about daughters who abandon their mothers and still think they're the victim. But beneath all the noise, I saw something else, a private message from my old mentor in DC. She had watched the panel and forwarded it to someone at a global nonprofit. They were expanding their domestic initiative on financial equity for women and wanted someone who understands the personal and professional implications. A week later, I signed the consulting contract. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's not a scene. It's the sound of your value being seen elsewhere. And that sound echoes. Sometimes the real turning point isn't a scream. It's the quiet click of a door you chose to walk through. Curious what happens when Rowan steps through the next one. There's a quiet cruelty in how people act when they believe you've lost your usefulness. They don't mourn your absence. They repurpose it. They reshape the space you once held into something easier to explain, less inconvenient. By the time you return, it's not just you who's changed. It's the entire story they've told about you. I wasn't planning to go to the reunion. It was my cousin Thea's engagement party, an upscale dinner in a private garden venue outside Saratoga. The invite was embossed, pretentious, and somehow managed to be both elegant and passive-aggressive. It arrived via email, not from Thea, but from her mother, Aunt Bethany. Subject line: "Family is still family. Hope to see you." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the interview, no olive branch, just assumption, an expectation that I would slip back into their carefully curated version of normal. I almost deleted it, but then I remembered. Aunt Bethany had always been one of Brielle's loudest supporters, the same woman who once called me a bit too self-righteous for someone who never had kids. She had orchestrated half of the whispers behind my back and stirred the pot during every family gathering, all while smiling with that wine-glazed grace people mistake for kindness. This wasn't a peace offering, it was bait. Still, I stared at that invitation for a long time, and something unexpected stirred. Not spite, not vengeance, curiosity. I wanted to see how they would look me in the eye now that I no longer needed them. Now that I had let the silence speak for me. I RSP'd yes. The venue was dripping in champagne light and white blossoms. People milled about in linen suits and pastel dresses, sipping Prosecco and pretending the air wasn't thick with decades of unresolved judgment. I wore navy, sleek, deliberate, unapologetically modern. My heels clicked against the marble like punctuation. Heads turned. Conversations paused for half a beat, and then resumed, slightly tighter. It didn't take long for the questions to come. Rowan, how have you been? Still doing that online thing? I heard you're working with some foundation now? That's nice. Giving back, huh? Every comment was coded in civility, but the subtext was unmistakable. How dare you shine without our permission? I smiled politely and let them ask. Across the courtyard, I spotted Brielle. Her dress was expensive, but her expression wasn't polished enough to match it. She looked thinner, not elegant thin, stressed thin. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and she kept checking her phone like she was waiting for an exit. She didn't approach. Neither did Mom. She was seated next to Aunt Bethany, whispering behind a fan, as though the Victorian era had returned for one night only. Then came the real moment. Thea tapped her glass, calling the room to attention. Before dinner, I just want to thank everyone who's been there for me, especially my family, and someone else, actually. She looked directly at me. I know we haven't always been close, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But Rowan, when you spoke your truth, it gave me permission to start looking at mine. And I realized, I've spent most of my life playing roles I didn't choose. Silence, real, weighty, no space to escape silence. She lifted her glass toward me. So thank you, not just for being here tonight, but for being visible. You changed more than you know. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not until the applause started. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't even unanimous. But it was real. And across the room, I saw my mother's face collapse inward. Just a flicker. The recognition that, for once, I wasn't the cautionary tale. I was the mirror. Later that night, when the crowd thinned and the music softened, Brielle finally approached me. She stood there, arms folded, like she was holding herself together. I didn't know Thea was going to say that, she muttered. Kind of dramatic, don't you think? I shrugged. Truth tends to feel dramatic to the people it exposes. She flinched, then looked away. I'm not here to fight, Brie. I didn't think you'd show up at all, she said quietly. I almost didn't. We stood in the lull of ambient chatter and distant laughter. Then she whispered something I didn't expect. I miss when we used to laugh. I met her eyes. I miss when that laughter didn't come at my expense. She nodded, just once, eyes glassy. I don't know how to fix this. That's because I'm not broken anymore, I said. You just stopped recognizing me. She didn't respond, and I didn't wait. I walked back to my car, heels clicking the same way they had when I arrived. Only this time, every step felt quieter in my chest. It wasn't vindication. It was a release. When the narrative turns, it's not always with a bang. Sometimes it's a quiet toast in a crowded room. And that's enough to flip everything. Curious what happens when Brielle comes calling next. Brielle's name appeared in my inbox on a cloudy Monday morning. The subject line was vague. Quick question. The message itself was shorter than I expected. Just a few lines about being in town, saying she was going through a rough patch, and asking if I had time to catch up. I didn't respond right away. For years, I had learned to silence myself, to keep peace with people who never respected my boundaries. But silence could also be strength. And this time, I needed clarity before I offered kindness. A week later, she showed up at the public event where I was scheduled to speak. She didn't RSVP or check in. She simply waited by the exit door, arms crossed, eyes wary. When the crowd dispersed, she approached like she was walking on broken glass. You were amazing up there, she said. I didn't expect this. I nodded politely, unsure of what she really came for. I got laid off last month, she admitted. Savings are drying up. The guy I was dating moved states without telling me. I've applied everywhere, but I keep getting rejection after rejection." She paused. "I remembered how resourceful you've always been, how you bounced back after everything, and I guess I was hoping you'd be willing to help, just until I can stand on my own." I didn't answer right away. The last time we sat face to face, she had told our family I was selfish for not giving Mom $100,000 to fund her luxury lifestyle. She called me cold, said I was jealous, all because I asked for fairness, not favoritism. Now here she was, asking for help. "I've changed," she added quietly, as if reading my thoughts. I didn't see things clearly before. I believed that she meant it. I also knew that apologies rarely came with changed patterns. So I chose what I never allowed myself before: closure. "I'm glad you're trying," I said. "But I'm not the person to fix this." Her eyes widened. "So you're really going to turn me away, after everything?" "I'm not turning you away," I said. "I'm just finally standing still. I'm not stepping in to clean up anymore." She didn't argue. She just blinked, once, then again, before nodding slowly and walking off. And that was the last time I saw her. Time moved on. I gave that talk on redefining boundaries and personal growth at 3 different conferences across the country. One went viral online. Comments flooded in from strangers who saw their own families in mine, who told me they never knew they were allowed to say no. I wasn't the responsible daughter anymore. I was someone who had chosen her life, built it with her own hands, setbacks and all. The home I lived in now had no shared passwords, no hushed conversations behind closed doors, no guilt dripping from the walls. It was quiet, but not the isolating kind. It was the kind of quiet you earn after weathering the storm. I no longer needed Mom's validation, or Brielle's approval, or Dad's passive silence. And when people asked me if I missed having a big family, I smiled and told them the truth. I'm building something better, something honest. Not revenge, not perfection, but peace. Looking back, I don't regret saying no. I regret how long I said yes, how long I let love disguise obligation, how often I confused family loyalty with emotional debt. Walking away wasn't cruel, it was necessary, because peace is priceless, and so is knowing your worth doesn't depend on who validates it. Have you ever had to set a boundary that others saw as betrayal? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment or tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe in stories that heal and empower, don't forget to subscribe for the next one. We've got more coming your way.